I'd never imagined that moving to a quiet suburban development in Northern Virginia could be so fraught with drama. But that was before I encountered Marilyn Dennison, better known in hushed neighborly whispers as Karen. My transfer to Poplar Ridge, a community famed for its manicured streets, elegant street lamps, and close-knit vibe, came with a hopeful expectation of peaceful living. My new home sat at the end of a winding street lined with hardwood trees, and from the moment I unpacked my boxes, I fell in love with the lush surroundings. Initially, everything seemed idyllic. I met a few neighbors who were friendly enough, exchanging small talk about local schools and the best pizzerias. But one presence loomed over the otherwise pleasant environment: Karen. Tall and slender, with a short ash-brown bob and a penchant for pastel blouses, she carried herself like a self-appointed monarch. Her posture exuded unwavering certainty that she alone ran this neighborhood, using her position on the Poplar Ridge Homeowners Association as a scepter of authority. My first run-in with Karen occurred just days after I moved in. I was trying to assemble a small raised bed for herbs in my backyard when she marched up the driveway unannounced, brandishing a clipboard. She wore a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Marilyn Dennison," she said, "but everyone calls me Karen. Short, simple, easy to remember." There was no warmth in her tone, just a calm arrogance. I offered a polite hello, but she cut me off, scanning the partially assembled planter. "Are you aware of the HOA guidelines regarding unsightly structures and visible backyard spaces?" she asked. "We don't permit anything that disrupts the uniform look of the neighborhood." I explained it was just a small herb garden for personal use, well within the rules. She frowned, flipping through her papers. We'll see." That was the note on which our relationship began. No neighborly welcome, no genuine conversation about interests, just a brisk assumption that I needed to be brought into compliance. I shrugged it off as an overzealous approach to an HOA job. If only I'd known how her meddling would escalate over time, especially when it came to pets. Poplar Ridge had the usual run of suburban households, families, retirees, singles, most of whom owned dogs or cats. Some neighbors took their well-groomed poodles or golden retrievers on evening strolls, while others had rescued mutts and cats of uncertain lineage. None of that seemed unusual to me. After all, people's pets are their own business, right? But soon, I started hearing rumors that Karen felt otherwise. She believed the prestige of Poplar Ridge was threatened by unrefined animal ownership, as though only show-worthy purebreds were fit to trot down the meticulously maintained sidewalks. I doubted such talk at first. It sounded too bizarre, even for an HOA busybody. But as I attended a few board meetings out of curiosity, I saw her unsubtle attempts to push for enhanced pet guidelines. At one meeting, Karen stood up, her voice cool and authoritative. "Poplar Ridge prides itself on high standards," she declared. "We want to attract quality homebuyers. Part of that is ensuring that the pets here reflect upscale values, fully vaccinated, properly trained, and ideally from recognized breeders." A few neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. One woman timidly raised her hand to ask if Karen was suggesting a ban on certain breeds. Karen responded with a slippery remark: "Not a ban per se, but perhaps we need a registration system to prevent uncontrolled or unsightly animals from roaming about." I felt a pit in my stomach, suspecting she was testing the waters for a more extreme measure. Over the following weeks, the rumor mill buzzed about Karen's plan to mandate that all dogs and cats be purebred. She apparently deemed random mixes unappealing, claiming they might lower property values or bring behavioral unpredictability. It was an outrageous concept. How could someone use an HOA to control the genetics of neighbors' pets? At first, no one believed it would go anywhere. Many board members, including a genial older man named Bob and a younger professional named Vanessa, seemed wary of Karen's obsession. But her forceful personality and knack for citing obscure bylaw clauses made her a formidable foe. "She's done this before with other matters," Bob confided in me after a meeting. "She browbeats everyone until they give in or at least remain silent. She's unstoppable once she fixates on something." Still, a sweeping ban on mixed-breed pets seemed impossible to enforce. Yet I sensed Karen wouldn't drop it easily. She appeared to relish the idea of shaping the neighborhood into her personal vision of refined living, right down to the type of animals people could own. A few folks quietly rehomed their rescues, fearful of future fines or harassment. I found that heartbreaking and doubly infuriating. I owned no pets myself at the time, but I was considering adopting a rescue dog once I'd settled in. Now I hesitated. The thought that Karen might pound on my door, measuring my dog's muzzle or demanding pedigree papers, made me uneasy. Meanwhile, The tension in the neighborhood grew with each new sign that Karen was drafting official proposals to curtail or ban unapproved pets. Something had to give. About 3 months after I moved in, the HOA circulated a new draft bylaw titled Refined Pet Ownership Standards for Poplar Ridge. It arrived in all our mailboxes, neatly typed and formatted. Reading it made my jaw drop. The document specified that, due to the neighborhood's commitment to an upscale environment, only certain recognized purebred dogs and cats would be permitted, while any crossbred or hybrid animals would be subject to additional scrutiny and potential fines if found to be a nuisance. The proposal was dripping with Karen's language, reeking of classism. Worse, it proposed limiting the size and type of each household's pets, even suggesting mandatory breed registration for dogs. If passed, the bylaw would take effect within 6 months, giving existing residents a grace period to rehome or replace any ineligible animals. The entire notion was monstrous, punishing families who loved their mixed-breed companions. Was that even legal? Possibly not. But Karen was forging ahead, counting on the board's complacency. Local chatter erupted. Some neighbors were outraged, especially those with rescue mutts or older cats that had no known lineage. Others, frightened of conflict, whispered they might quietly acquiesce. Karen, meanwhile, ramped up her rhetoric. At the next board session, she stood with an air of triumph. "We must remain a premium community," she insisted, eyes glittering. "Lower-tier pets degrade the atmosphere and deter high-value buyers. This is about preserving our standards." I was livid. It wasn't just about the animals, it was the principle. Who was she to define which pets were worthy? But as an individual homeowner, I wasn't sure how best to fight. The board seemed split. A few members expressed sympathy for existing pet owners, but Karen had enough allies or intimidated fence-sitters that the proposed bylaw seemed dangerously close to approval. That's when an idea hatched in my mind. If Karen wanted to play the game of exotic or purebred status, perhaps I could outmaneuver her in a way she wouldn't expect. I began researching local and state regulations about pet ownership, particularly unusual companion animals. Soon, I stumbled across an intriguing loophole. Miniature pigs were, in some jurisdictions, classified as livestock or exotic pets, but certain states recognized them as legitimate companion animals, akin to emotional support animals, if properly registered. Could that be my way of defying her purebred-only madness? I wasn't sure yet, but the notion of adopting a mini pig, a squealing, snorting, adorable creature, was both amusing and potent. If I could legally register one and show all the correct paperwork, Karen might be unable to penalize me. And oh, how that would gall her, especially since a mini pig definitely wasn't on her list of refined purebreds. My heart pounded with excitement. This could be the perfect protest. Before diving headlong into pig ownership, I did thorough research. Mini pigs, also known as micro pigs or teacup pigs, require a decent amount of care. They're highly intelligent, can be trained to use a litter box or go outside, and can weigh anywhere from 50 to 100 pounds full-grown, despite the mini label. They eat specialized feed, enjoy occasional veggies, and need routine veterinary checkups. They're social creatures, often thriving on companionship and mental stimulation. Legally, some neighborhoods or cities ban them as livestock, but my region had no blanket prohibition, provided I had the correct paperwork designating it as an exotic companion pet. I discovered a reputable mini pig rescue about an hour's drive away, run by a kind-hearted woman named Bev. She had half a dozen adoptable pigs, each one rescued from unscrupulous breeders or families who hadn't realized pigs can't remain teacup-sized forever. Bev assured me that if the HOA contested my ownership, I could cite state guidelines about exotic companion animals. It might hold up, so long as I kept the pig well-maintained and complied with noise and cleanliness standards. It was a gamble, but the more I learned, the more I felt I was doing the right thing, both for me and for any neighbors petrified by Karen's heavy-handed attempt to ban their beloved pets. Perhaps if I showed that you could adopt something even less conventional than a mixed-breed dog and still be within the law, others would feel emboldened to keep their animals. And frankly, the idea of outwitting Karen with a happy, snorting pig gave me a thrill. Over the next few weeks, I prepared for a potential new housemate. I set up a secure portion of my backyard with sturdy fencing, ensuring no easy escape routes. I researched pig diets, ordered a small piggy bed, and even picked out a name: Waffles, my future companion. Meanwhile, the HOA hammered away at the refined pet ownership standards, edging closer to a final vote. I tried voicing dissent at a public meeting, But Karen brushed me off, claiming that the majority desired the policy. Perhaps some folks did want fewer barking dogs or unpredictable animals, but surely not to this extreme. Then came the day I drove to Bev's rescue. She introduced me to a pinkish-brown piglet with bright eyes and a docile temperament, though he had a playful streak. He nuzzled my hand, sniffing curiously. My heart melted. Bev explained his background. Rescued from a breeder who'd lied about his adult size. Now about 6 months old, likely to top out around 60 pounds. I signed the adoption forms, then we submitted the necessary paperwork to register Waffles as a companion pig. Once everything processed, I'd be fully legit under the state's exotic pet guidelines. Little did I know just how quickly this cheerful little pig would become the talk of Poplar Ridge, and how Karen would react with outrage and incredulity at my contravention of her purebred demands. Bringing Waffles home was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. On the short drive, he sat in a secure crate, occasionally letting out soft grunts. Once at my house, I carried him inside to show him around. He trotted gingerly on the hardwood floors, sniffing corners, occasionally pausing to root around a rug. At around 15 pounds, he was still small enough to pick up, but I knew he'd grow. Soon enough, he'd be stout and strong. That first week, we bonded quickly. I fed him specially formulated pig pellets, supplemented with fresh veggies. He learned to respond to simple commands, like come and no, using treats as rewards. Surprising me with his intelligence, Waffles figured out how to push open a slightly ajar door with his snout, so I had to latch everything carefully. At night, he slept in a cozy corner in the laundry room, grunting contentedly if I gave him a bedtime scratch behind the ears. Before introducing him to the neighborhood, I made sure I had all relevant documents in order: the official state registration acknowledging Waffles as an exotic companion, proof of his vaccinations, and a letter from Bev's rescue verifying his breed/size expectations. I also read up on local noise and odor ordinances, determined to keep Waffles from becoming a nuisance. The last thing I wanted was to give Karen legitimate grounds to complain. Of course, secrecy was impossible. Waffles sometimes squealed or snorted, and I took him out in the backyard for exercise. Neighbors began noticing. Some peeked over fences to see a pig scuttling around among the petunias. Linda, who lived 2 doors down, squealed with delight upon seeing Waffles. "He's adorable," she declared. "I didn't know we could have pigs here." I explained the legal details. Linda, enthralled, asked to pet him. Waffles accepted the attention happily. Word spread quickly, and soon a handful of neighbors were dropping by, curious about the newcomer. Kids giggled, trying to feed him carrots. The general reaction was positive. Everyone found Waffles charming, a quirky addition to the suburban milieu. But then came the big question: how would Karen react once she learned about my new occupant? It didn't take long for Karen to discover the truth. One afternoon, Waffles and I were in the backyard playing with a small ball. He nudged it with his snout, chasing it around. Suddenly, a sharp voice from beyond the fence made me jump. "What on earth is that noise?" asked Karen. She often patrolled the neighborhood, and my yard apparently was on her route. Before I could answer, she unlatched my side gate, without knocking, mind you, and marched in, clipboard at the ready. Her eyes widened at the sight of Waffles. For a moment, she seemed genuinely speechless, an emotion I hadn't thought her capable of. Finally, her voice snapped out. "Is that a pig?" I nodded. "Yes, Karen. Meet Waffles, my new companion. He's legally recognized under state exotic pet guidelines. I have all the paperwork right here." Calmly, I handed her a folder containing photocopies of the registration and relevant laws. Karen's face contorted. "You cannot be serious. Poplar Ridge does not allow barnyard animals. This is a refined community. We only permit purebred dogs and cats, and soon that will be official." She jabbed the folder with a finger. "This is preposterous." I forced a polite smile. "Actually, the bylaws never mention miniature pigs. They're not classified as typical livestock in our state if registered as companions. So I'm fully in compliance. The city has no ban, and neither does the HOA specifically. Also, your proposed purebred-only policy isn't even enacted yet." She glanced through the paperwork, expression darkening at each page. "This is unacceptable," she declared, though her voice held a note of uncertainty. "I'll see if the board can disallow it under the nuisance clause. These creatures are unsanitary, no matter your fancy paperwork." Waffles, sensing tension, let out a soft oink. Karen grimaced as if personally insulted. "I'll be filing a complaint," she spat. Then she whirled around and stomped off, slamming the gate behind her. My heart pounded, but I felt triumphant. There was no immediate rule she could cite to ban him. I was prepared for a battle, but so far, the law was on my side. In the days following Karen's meltdown, Waffles became a local celebrity. The neighborhood kids adored him. Some asked to visit, pet him, or watch him root around the yard. Parents, curious about the legality, asked me questions. I explained that I'd done everything by the book. A few were so charmed that they jokingly said they wanted a mini pig, too. The entire situation turned my corner of Poplar Ridge into a cheerful hub, with Waffles at the center, wagging his tiny tail. Karen, meanwhile, was on the warpath. She circulated a memo clearly her doing, though it bore the HOA letterhead, imploring residents to support the new purebred standard to preserve our community's dignity. She specifically mentioned exotic livestock creeping into private residences, which many interpreted as a veiled reference to Waffles. The outlandish document claimed that barnyard squeals could decrease property values and that unpredictable behaviors from unorthodox animals might pose a public safety threat. The reaction was mixed. Some folks rolled their eyes, recognizing Karen's signature alarmism. Others grew uneasy, not wanting to be caught in her crosshairs. But I was heartened to find that many more expressed quiet support for my right to keep Waffles. They saw him as a testament to the idea that not all suburban developments must conform to a single cookie-cutter vision. One day, I noticed a small line of cars in front of my house, neighbors who'd brought treats or just wanted to say hi to the pig. I let them take turns feeding Waffles tiny apple slices. He snorted happily, flopping over to let people rub his belly. Laughter and squeals, this time from human children, filled the air. The sense of communal joy was palpable, like Waffles had broken down some barrier of fear that Karen's stern presence had built up. Naturally, Karen wasn't amused. She glared from across the street, watching the casual gatherings. A few times, I overheard her telling passersby that I was ruining the aesthetic, but her words seemed hollow in the face of Waffles' popularity. She tried filing nuisance complaints, citing odor concerns or excessive noise, but each time, city inspectors found no valid grounds. My yard was clean, Waffles' pen well-maintained, and the only noise beyond mild snorts or oinks was me or visitors laughing. Despite Karen's protests, the proposed, refined pet ownership standards still loomed. The HOA scheduled a final vote for a Saturday afternoon at the community center, where all homeowners could cast ballots. Tensions ran high. If Karen mustered enough support, the bylaw might pass, placing every non-purebred dog, cat, or exotic pet in jeopardy. But from what I'd gathered, a sizable faction felt her demands were too extreme. Especially after seeing her meltdown over Waffles, they were disinclined to give her more power. The day arrived. Streams of residents filled the center's modest hall. The HOA board members sat at a long table, Karen among them, wearing a pastel suit and an air of righteous defiance. Bob took the microphone first, explaining the significance of the vote. We are deciding whether to adopt new guidelines restricting pet ownership solely to recognized purebred dogs and cats, with an exceptions committee for certain specialized breeds. If passed, the bylaw will also ban any unregistered or non-approved pets, except in unusual circumstances. Karen then stood, delivering a grand speech about preserving the exclusivity of Poplar Ridge and how riffraff pets degrade the community's image. She pointedly referenced recent incidents involving ill-suited creatures that might cause public nuisance, clearly alluding to Waffles. Her words dripped with contempt, though she never named me or my pig. Next, the floor opened for public comments. I raised my hand, stepping forward. My heart pounded, but I spoke with conviction. My name is my name. I'm a homeowner here, and yes, I own a mini pig named Waffles. He's properly registered, harmless, and widely beloved by many of my neighbors. This proposed bylaw not only infringes on personal freedom, but also punishes families with mixed-breed dogs and rescue animals. It's discriminatory and unwelcoming. Cheers and applause rose from parts of the crowd. Others nodded sympathetically. Then a woman with a rescue mutt spoke up, sharing how her dog helped her elderly mother with daily companionship. Another gentleman recounted that he'd fostered multiple mixed-breed pets over the years, none of which had caused any issues. Each testimony chipped away at Karen's narrative. Karen fired back with dire warnings about property values. But Bob and Vanessa politely challenged her, asking for concrete evidence that mixed-breed or exotic pets harmed property values. She provided none, just nebulous claims about prestige. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Finally, the board announced the time for voting. Homeowners lined up to cast ballots, some with visible passion, others with quiet determination. Anxious minutes passed while the votes were tallied. Karen watched with a forced smile, arms crossed tight. The result: the bylaw failed to gain the necessary majority. A wave of relief swept the room. Cheers and clapping ensued. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Karen's face twisted in frustration, but she had to swallow her defeat. Her grand plan to enforce purebred-only pets had collapsed under the collective weight of reason and empathy. News of the bylaw's rejection spread quickly through Poplar Ridge. Many neighbors rejoiced at being free from the looming threat. Households with mixed-breed dogs or uncertain lineage cats felt immediate relief. Some who'd felt pressured to rehome their animals, ironically, now considered adopting new pets. Meanwhile, Waffles' local fame soared. He became a sort of mascot for community spirit and personal choice. Karen tried to spin her loss as temporary. She circulated memos claiming the fight isn't over and that she'd propose new strict training requirements for all pets. But few took her seriously. The board, emboldened by the community's stance, insisted that any future measure pass a thorough review and a supermajority. Karen's ability to bully through outlandish rules was effectively curtailed. For a while, she sulked around the neighborhood, her pastel suits and clipboard less imposing than before. Perhaps she realized that her vendetta had backfired. Rather than elevating Poplar Ridge, it had made her appear petty and elitist. The more she seethed, the more neighbors found ways to celebrate their diversity. Canines of all shapes, felines of all colors, and, of course, one remarkable little pig. In private, a few folks worried Karen might attempt personal retaliation. She'd done so in the past with petty citations. But I remained vigilant, ensuring Waffles' living area stayed spotless, abiding by all existing rules. If she filed baseless complaints, code enforcement would easily see through them. Over time, even she seemed to accept that the pig was here to stay. Meanwhile, Waffles continued thriving. He explored the yard, occasionally joined by neighbor kids who gave him gentle pats. He learned new tricks, like ringing a small bell when he wanted a snack, and each success elicited laughs from anyone watching. Life in Poplar Ridge settled into a calmer routine, albeit one in which Karen's menacing presence felt decidedly diminished. A few months later, as Waffles approached his first birthday, I decided to host a small celebration. It was partly for fun, partly to thank neighbors who'd supported me during the pet policy debacle. I decorated my backyard with streamers, set up a table of snacks, and made a special pig-friendly birthday cake, mostly mashed sweet potatoes with a single carrot candle. Invitations went out to a select group: friends, board members who had opposed Karen's rule, and curious families. Word spread. Before I knew it, a dozen kids and multiple adult neighbors showed up, excited to see the birthday pig. As Waffles waddled around, wearing a silly little party hat tied under his chin, guests snapped photos, giggling at his cuteness. The kids sang a playful happy birthday, clapping as he eagerly devoured his sweet potato cake. Meanwhile, grown-ups mingled, joking about how Waffles had become a symbol of neighborly defiance against Karen's tyranny. Some teased me. "You know, you started a revolution with that snout." Halfway through the party, I noticed a familiar pastel figure lingering by the gate: Karen. She wore a pinched expression, her eyes flicking from the squealing kids to the banner reading "Happy Birthday, Waffles." For a moment, I feared she might barge in and cause a scene. Instead, she hovered uncertainly. Perhaps the unstoppable force that had once bulldozed over the neighborhood realized she had little ground left to stand on. Feeling magnanimous, I walked over. "Hi, Karen," I said softly. "Would you like to come in? We have extra snacks, if you're interested." She hesitated, fiddling with her clipboard, ever the staple accessory. "I'm just checking that you're not violating noise ordinances," she said stiffly. "The party's well within the decibel limits," I assured her with a friendly smile. "We'll be done by early evening. No violations here." She nodded, pursing her lips. For an instant, I thought she might snap, but then she mumbled, "All right. Carry on." Without further comment, she turned and left. While not exactly a truce, her departure signaled she lacked the will to start another fruitless fight. I returned to the party, shrugging at the curious looks from guests. Karen being Karen, I said. We continued celebrating, oblivious to any tension. That evening, as the sun set over Poplar Ridge, I gazed at Waffles contentedly snoozing after his big day, a swirl of gratitude filling me. We had defied an unjust rule, found a home, and discovered unwavering support from neighbors who valued compassion over elitism. In the subsequent months, the sense of unity within Poplar Ridge deepened. Other residents felt encouraged to speak up against arbitrary decrees. The board, having realized how close it had come to passing a discriminatory bylaw, re-examined many older covenants. They made steps to ensure that future proposals were subject to thorough community input. Freed from Karen's aura of intimidation, Bob, Vanessa, and other board members championed a more open, resident-friendly governance. Karen, for her part, still roamed the streets, occasionally issuing minor warnings about lawns or holiday decorations. But the glint of absolute power in her eyes had dimmed. Her biggest gambit, controlling pet ownership, had failed spectacularly. If it had succeeded, many beloved animals would have been forced out. Instead, the fiasco brought neighbors together in solidarity. Ironically, more families began adopting rescued dogs or cats, feeling safer from arbitrary harassment. They joked that if a pig could live here happily, so could their Labrador mix or tabby cat. The neighborhood gradually relaxed, forging a friendlier, more tolerant atmosphere. A few times, younger kids would skip up to me, excitedly sharing pictures of their new rescue pup, calling it Waffles' friend. I beamed, proud that Waffles had sparked a subtle cultural shift in our corner of the suburbs. Every so often, I'd cross paths with Karen at the mailbox cluster. She'd nod stiffly, occasionally muttering a half-hearted greeting. Sometimes, she'd stare at a small bag of pig feed I carried, as though physically pained by the reminder of her defeat. But she never again threatened me about Waffles' presence. She knew the law was on my side, and the community wouldn't rally to her cause if she tried again. It's now been over a year since that fateful series of events. Waffles is nearing 2 years old, weighing about 55 pounds, stocky, plump, and brimming with personality. He roams the backyard under careful supervision, happily rooting around patches of grass and flopping in the sun. Indoors, he's affectionate, waddling over to greet me with soft grunts whenever I return from errands. My home no longer feels empty. His playful spirit and surprisingly gentle nature brighten each day. Though Karen remains on the HOA board, her grand ambition to impose a purebred-only standard has fizzled. Many neighbors, once too intimidated to speak, now voice their opinions freely. The bylaw fiasco stands as a lesson in standing up against authoritarian rules, whether they concern paint colors, lawn ornaments, or the lineage of our pets. Poplar Ridge, for all its tidy sidewalks and uniform mailboxes, has discovered it can still harbor individuality and acceptance. Sometimes, I reflect on how a random notion, adopting a mini pig, blossomed into an unlikely rebellion. If Karen hadn't pushed so hard to ban mixed-breed animals, I might never have discovered the joys of pig ownership. Yet, Waffles' presence proved that refinement doesn't equate to uniformity or snobbery. Real community thrives on compassion, tolerance, and the willingness to let each family and each pet express their own unique charm. Whenever I take Waffles for a short walk through the neighborhood, yes, I even harness train him, kids squeal with delight. Some neighbors wave from their porches, calling out, "Hi, Waffles." Meanwhile, Karen sometimes lurks behind her curtains, scowling. But the snorts of happiness from my adorable pig overshadow any negativity she might project. And so, life continues in Poplar Ridge, a testament to the idea that not even the most overbearing HOA Karen can stifle the unbreakable bond between humans and their beloved, sometimes unconventional, pets. Waffles is living proof that one small pig, and a community's collective sense of fairness, can triumph over pettiness, hypocrisy, and self-appointed gatekeepers of refinement.